Now we're going to finish the stern and insert the rudder post. Make sure when you put your hole in for the rudder post, you leave enough room for the propeller to be installed. I use a drill that's approximately the same size as the wire is in diameter for the rudder post. Hand drill it, or use the rudder fingertip that we used before. My favorite is this little tool that I picked up at a rummage sale. It works great. Makes nice holes. Alright, now we've got our hole made. And what we want to do is we want to see where the swing is for the rudder post itself. So you do that by inserting it into the wood and then press down on it and make a mark in the balsa. That gives you the approximate swing of the rudder post. Always make sure it's in straight. If you get that hole crooked, big trouble. Next, just take a felt tip pen and mark right along where that swing is. This is the area we're going to cut out with our knife. Then you have to mark a lead into it, and that's where the rudder bar, the arm, will actually lay down so that it can go into the rudder servo. Once we get that, we'll get the X-Acto knife out and we'll cut it down. Try to go about 1 layer deep so that you don't go through and perforate the bottom of the boat. Alright, now we're going to cut that piece out and then we're going to flip it loose. Now, I use a dental tool, but if you want to use something else for a small wood chisel, use a little tiny flathead screwdriver like this 1976 Ace-Lite. Alright, now we get her set up and just go in there between the layers of balsa and it should pop right out, unless you use too much glue underneath it. If there's any extra pieces, just kind of chisel them out. Alright, now let's insert our rudder post and see what happens. And lo and behold, we've cut it too close. So we're going to have to go in there and cut it a little wider. Now it's nice and wide. Now let's see how she turns. Yeah, we got a pretty good swing there, but there's just one problem. We got no place for the actual rudder arm to move. So we got to cut a little more out. Go down and cut down another layer, pop it out. See how that one fits. It should fit quite right. If it doesn't, take out another layer. Just don't go too far down. You have about 3 layers to work with. Now, here's our rudder arm. You notice we've got this little piece here that we glued on the top to keep it from falling out of the post. I took that and I always take it and I trim it down a lot. So now we'll thread the post on. And you see how it can't come back out through the top. You also see how I have it trimmed. And this is the assembly we're going to put into the boat. Alright, now behind my hands is us installing the assembly. And notice it swings pretty good. But if you take a look at the rudder post, you can see we have a problem. It's loosey-goosey in there, and it's wiggling back and forth. Apparently I bored my hole a little bit too wide. So now what we have to do is we have to cut out another piece because we're going to put a shim in there. So cut down all those layers and just pop it right out. Now do one of our fancy measuring tricks here and measure the approximate length that you just cut out. Now make sure that the width actually overlaps the hole. So here you see the width overlapping the hole. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go up through the hole and we're going to make a mark. And that mark will show us where to re-drill. Use a little bit more narrow of a drill. And we make our nice mark. keep in mind that this isn't the only way to do this. This is just my way of doing it. And there we go. Now, before you drill this out, what you want to do is, see, we got our mark here. What you want to do is you want to get some glue and put some nice wood glue along the edges. We're doing this so that when we drill through this piece, it doesn't crack in half. So just put it around the edges and then smear a little bit on the face. And it just helps to reinforce it for when you're drilling. Saves you a little bit of frustration later, but it's going to cost us a little bit of time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stab it with the old handy X-Acto knife, set it down, and do my favorite thing, allow it to dry. Alright, now we're going to put this in with the rudder post, and notice here that I've taken the piece and I've trimmed the corners on it, just to give me a little extra room around it. But it fits quite snugly, that's good. And we're going to use a whole bunch of glue in there. Glue is going to be our friend here. It looks like it's too much, but it ain't. And you're saying, well, we're going to block the hole. Well, actually what we're going to do is not completely block the hole, because we're going to run the rudder post down through the glue. And that's going to help shore up the whole assembly. So once it's reinstalled like that, if I can get it in front of the camera, once again, you allow it to dry. That's going to be a lot of glue. It may take overnight. Alright, there it is. And what we have to do now is we got to break that loose. It's going to take a little bit of force. So you give it a snap, you'll feel it crack free. Got plenty of room for the swing. And trying to do this with one hand in front of the camera isn't easy. But you can see that we can swing this and we no longer have that wiggly rudder post. Next, I had to trim down a bit so that we can get a decent lay on that rudder arm. That's so it can reach down and reach the servo. But in doing that, you can see that we've raised it a little bit here, which is fine. This whole build accounts for that. Here's our deck that we're going to be using. We'll put the aft deck on there and test fit it, and you can see that it sits right on top of that rudder post. That's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to adjust that. And take just a piece of cardstock and do some simple measuring where you measure the distance that you have right now. And then we're going to cut 2 pieces of wood that are a little bit taller than that. Then we glue those in place here, and that's where the deck will sit. Right on top of those 2 little blocks. Now, if you want to make it a sort of a flat stern, you can go ahead and just nail it in like that. What I prefer to do with this one, I want to make it closer to the drawing, so I slide it back a little bit. And that's going to get a little more flare and give me more of a fantail. So you can see here, and there's an angle. So we have to glue that down and let it set. Of course, put a weight on it. And now we've got our angle going there. That's going to make a real nice fantail. Next, we take these metal files are great for this. You can get a nice angle on them. You bevel that tail in there. Now, how do you get the wood to wrap around that? Put it in some water, hot water, close to boiling, and leave it overnight. Don't burn yourself. Now, tap the extra water off onto a paper towel. We're going to glue it, the center of the wood, right at the center of the stern. And we're also going to make the upper edge flush to the deck. I say what you do here is you're making it smile, because it looks like a smile. And that's going to give us the nice fantail look that we're looking for. use some glue and some pins, and then let it sit and dry. And here it is after it is dried. You can see we got the pins in there, and we got a nice overlap. We're going to be cutting a lot of that away. We're also going to be putting some flush pieces on each side to cover up that extra opening. But notice the grain of the wood. Okay, the grain of the wood is vertical, and that allows it to make this bend. And you do that with the rest of the wood that you're using to close it off. Here's the final product before we sand. You can see here it's flush to the deck. And we've got a little overhang here. We have a little lip right there. We'll sand into that. And we'll use some wood putty to fill in the extra spaces. First I want to sand before I wood putty it. Once again, this file works great, okay, because we can make it flush with the curve of the stern. It takes time, it takes patience. Don't rush it. We're not in a hurry here. I like these little files. They work out nicely. I rob them for my wife whenever I can. Alright, now people ask what grade sandpaper I use. I don't know. I guess it says 220 on it, and it's just kind of a nice medium grade. That on a block of hardwood will help you get the extra sanding that you want out of it. And you can see here how we're coming around to make it look a lot like the drawing of the actual boat. Now these cracks right here, we fill all cracks with wood filler. And the same thing is always done. You use the filler, use a little bit of water, and work it in. And here you go. We'll sand that out, and you get this. And looky what we got. We've got a nice stern here. So next, we're going to make deck houses. We got a nice boat going.